In this episode of the Toolbox, we'll take a look at the framework that I wish was the most popular, Svelte.js, plus some great tools in the short segment, including Svelte and React utilities. You'll also find out why I think Svelte can save JavaScript. The pace of the web is relentless, and that's why you need the Toolbox. Hello everyone, this is PreviewJS, and I stream about front-end and full-stack tools Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Follow me and subscribe on LinkedIn and YouTube for more content. And if you want to watch any of the past episodes, make sure you take a look at my blog, rabo.org. So I tend to love frameworks that are easier for humans to program. And so my favorite, as you probably have heard before, is Vue.js. I really feel like things should be simpler and not harder for developers. However, there's another framework that I wish was the best, and that's Svelte. But before we talk about Svelte, let's take a look at some of the cool, interesting projects. And a lot of them are related to Svelte because that's what I'm talking about today. So let me switch over to my side-by-side view. And of course, you can find all the previous episodes and anything else that I'm doing on my blog, rabo.org. So you can see the sort of article for what I'm doing today. And if you want to look at any of the links, you can scroll up in the comments and find them at the top of the chat on LinkedIn, or they'll be in the YouTube video as well. And you can also, of course, find them on the rabo.org website. You can just go to this toolbox section and you can see all of the previous episodes. And I tend to cover a lot of frameworks. I've been doing that recently. So I do also do videos on other tips and tricks. So check it out. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. So in the shorts, you can find a lot of the utilities that I usually talk about in the episodes. So let's go ahead and start with the first link, which will be definitely Svelte. So this is the project that I'm going to be talking about today. The interesting thing about Svelte is that it's really a platform that has been trying to climb up in the sort of likability scale. So it's actually in the last State of JavaScript survey, it got the highest rate of user satisfaction or developer satisfaction of any framework. And I can relate because I really love the way this framework works. It's very easy to learn and it's pretty awesome and powerful. So essentially, in this site, you can find a tutorial, which is pretty cool. And then there's also this REPL section, which is just a way for you to test out the framework. This is kind of what this is kind of what Svelte looks like. So you can define a variable and then very quickly use that variable as an expression in your code. So we'll go into a more detailed demo, but the REPL is really cool because you can just try out the framework and then you can see what happens when this framework converts everything into JavaScript. So it's, you can also see, of course, CSS output as well. You can download this code, et cetera, et cetera. There's also a really good tutorial that walks you through all of the features, or at least the main features of the platform, as well as, of course, this docs section. So this is what we'll be talking about today. And, it's nowhere as complicated as other platforms, and that's really why I love it so much. So in addition to that, last week I talked about Next.js, and so there is a related project called Svelte Kit, and this is Svelte's answer to Next.js. Now I have to say that it isn't anywhere near as complete or featureful as something like Next.js, but this is what you would use if you wanted to have things like routing and other things like that you would need in most frameworks. So it really, it's not what it should be. One of the things that happened recently is Rich Harris, the developer of Svelte, got hired by Vercel to work full-time on this project. So this used to be Rich's side project at the New York Times, and everybody loved it so much. And so Vercel, who also owns Next.js, as a matter of fact, hired him to come full-time and work on the project. So, not sure if anybody has tried Svelte before, or I'd love to hear in the comments what other frameworks perhaps that you're using. So let's take a look at the next thing. So this is something that came out of like left field. The developer, Rich Harris, actually started another project called Svelte Cubed. So one of the things that is really nice about Svelte is its ability to handle animation. And so you can create pretty complex animations, and it has like a lot of hooks for animation properties and also animation events. So as things are getting drawn, it'll give you hooks for that. So this is actually something built on top of another platform called Three.js, which is pretty awesome. Three.js is like a library that lets you do fairly complex 3D animations. And so it's a 3D engine that just runs on top of JavaScript. It's surprisingly fast. I mean, there's some pretty cool stuff in here. There's some games that have been built with this platform. So you could see a lot of examples on the Three.js website. But Svelte Cube is essentially a version or a library that sits on top of Three.js to help you do all of those type of 3D animation project. I'm not really huge into 3D animation, and it was sort of a surprise that the developer started to work on this, because I figured he'd be working on the next version of Svelte, but he actually decided to do this. I guess he could do whatever he wants. So this is actually pretty cool. If I was using Three.js, in the same way that I love D3, but I like C3 because it's like a simpler version of D3. I think this would be pretty cool because I like the way that Svelte works with animations. So before we get going, I finally turned on the comments. So awesome. There's Peter, one of the regulars here from Vienna. That's super cool. Wow, that is something. There's the always amazing LinkedIn user. It's the generic user. If you have, I think you can turn on something that hides your identity in LinkedIn for these kind of things. So I always love that there's a LinkedIn user. So there's my friend Dewana, who will be taking a look at your comments and making sure that I keep track of everything. So I appreciate Dewana so much, and it's good to have her. So if you have any questions, she'll be manning the comments and reactions from people. So Boston, it's 1 p.m. How's it going? My daughter used to live in Boston, so that's pretty cool. And Brazil, I wonder what time it is right now in Brazil. I guess it depends. Brazil's really huge, so it depends on where you would be. I have no idea what sort of time zones they have there, if they have the same time zones. So there's also Tushar from India. That's fantastic. Love that. And watching on mute while working. Oh, yeah. I think you can turn on captions depending on where you're watching it from. I think LinkedIn has like a closed captioning little icon at the bottom, so you can turn that on if you want to. So somebody's saying, yeah, definitely do that. Don't get in trouble watching this stuff. Let's see. No, wait. Yeah. So why did he leave? Vercel should buy Svelte Kit as well. Yeah, I mean, they hired the developer to work full time on the projects. So I expect this is one of the reasons I'm really excited about the framework. So it is the number like 3 or 4 framework in terms of developer likability, I guess you would call it. So if you go to, I'm going to open up a tab here and go to the State of JS site, and we can take a look at the results. And if you come over here, you can take a look at, libraries. And you could see sort of track all these different libraries over time. And I think Next.js or Svelte is right here. You can see that it's still climbing, whereas Angular is sort of going backwards on this grid in terms of popularity. But yeah, so if you look at user satisfaction versus usage, let's see if we can make this a little bit smaller, because I think if you take a look at this, you'll be able to see that Svelte is really well liked in terms of user satisfaction. So if you look at this list of frameworks, in terms of user satisfaction, you can see that Svelte is actually, I guess, on top for this section in terms of front-end frameworks. So I really love it, and I think you'll see the reason today why I think it's so cool, and I wish it was the #1 framework, because I would love to use it all the time, and I just think it needs a little bit more baking. So let's see, who else is in here? Oh, this thing is scrolling pretty good. Yeah, I'd love to know if anybody else has tried Svelte at all, or what other frameworks you use. That'd be great to put on the chat. So let's see, or even if you've seen or used any sort of other animation library. I always like checking out new things, so that's cool. So the Retroman started a project with Svelte Kit. So SCSS processing really slow, unable to find really good documentation on the topic. So the course that I created has, so I'll do a demo today, but you'll see that I have a link to a course. And if you scroll up to see the links on LinkedIn, or go to rabo.org and look for the article today, you'll see all the links at the bottom. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll get access to the course for free with that link for 24 hours. And I did install Bootstrap SaaS in the project and the library. Today, I'm just using a quick framework to just make it look decent. But if you want to learn how to do that, then I've got that, and I've shown that. So so let's see. Can we compare how the basic stuff? Can we compare how the basic stuff that happens in React and Vue create a component? Yeah, I think you will really love how simple it is to work with props and events in Svelte. It's a lot, like, I love Vue because it is simple, but this thing is even simpler than Vue, so I think you'll really get a kick out of that. So I'm on Jordan, 8 p.m. Wow, so there's somebody in the other side of the world talking to us from the nighttime. So Southern California, where it's like 3 hours behind, so this is one of the 10 a.m. I appreciate you giving up maybe you're surfing today to come see this, so awesome. Let's see, hello from Bay Area, 10:09 p.m. So a lot of people. Super. All right, so let's continue with what I was talking about. So Svelte Cubed, pretty cool. And another sort of project that I love from Svelte is something called Degit, and I'm not sure where I put it in here. So let's see. So this is 3JS. Let's see, this is just a demo. And looks like, okay, so another tool that I love is this thing called Degit. So this is actually part of the Svelte toolkit. What it does is, it's actually how you install Svelte. You don't use a CLI like you do with most projects. You essentially make a copy of an existing repo. So this little utility allows you to just clone a repo without any of the history. So you can actually, I use this all the time for for a lot of my repos. I usually begin a new project, by basing it on an old project. So this is super easy. You do like npx Degit or npx install Degit, and then you can specify normally just the name of the user. So if it is a GitHub repo, you could just say the name of the user. So for me, it would be Planet of the Web, and then the name of the repo. And you can even download a branch and just get the branch without any of the history, so that you can base your project on that. So I use this thing all the time. You can also do subdirectories and all kinds of cool stuff. So I really love this utility. It's kind of a very tiny part, and you'll see on the demo that you can use it to install. And that's actually, there is no CLI. Maybe that'll change in the future, but I think it's pretty handy. So let's see. Another thing that I liked this week, and so I'm going into some React things now. I like this little VS Code extension called PreviewJS. This is pretty interesting. What it does is lets you preview a component without having to like start your server or run your build tool. If you just want to tweak a component, it allows you to just pull it up, and notice that it lets you also control and pass the properties. So you can sort of create the whole component and preview it without having to start all the complicated stuff. And there's actually quite a lot of functionality here. You know, there are some pro features. So if you want to support the developer, you can get the pro edition. I'm not sure how much it is. I haven't really switched to pro, but it's pretty cool. I like that sort of a lot. I love VS Code utility. So if you know of any of them, I'd love to hear that as well. I love that. This little extension looks pretty cool. So also I found a React library for, a library for React. It actually works with a lot of other projects. So this is a really nicely developed library. I mean, it comes with like a rich text editor in it, and it has a lot of really nice styles for components. It works not just with Next.js, but also Gatsby and Remix. So if you're using any of those projects, or if you're using the Create React app just on the React application, or if you use Vite, which is what I normally use for bundlers, for managing my projects and stuff. And it looks great, very customizable. So if you go to the manual, you can see that you can theme it. It has a lot of different types of elements, so forms. It has dates, all kinds of stuff that you can use. It's really almost like a framework with a ton of components. I don't use React enough to sort of try out a lot of different libraries. So yeah, I would love to hear if you use any other component libraries yourself. So, all right. So one more thing I wanted to mention, and I mentioned it a little bit, is that I do have a course that you can get for free on Svelte if you follow me on LinkedIn. And let's see if it's over here. Yeah. So in the list of links, there is a link to this post, which has the course on Svelte that I've done. And this is a slightly longer version of what I'm going to do today. So it goes through and shows you, for example, how to do Sass and do preprocessors. It's a little bit more involved. It does, so Svelte uses a rollup, which is a module bundler. I like to use Vite. Vite actually also uses rollup, and rollup was also created by Rich Harris, the developer of Svelte. So, it's a really good project, but it feels, I don't know, I really don't like Webpack. It's really complicated. Rollup feels a little bit easier, but also a little bit more complicated than something like Vite. So I tend to use Vite for everything now, and a lot of people are switching to that. So that's a great project. That's interesting. So no question. What do you use as a daily driver? Vue? I mean, I don't. I tend to work on projects, so I'm a full-time instructor here at LinkedIn. So I tend to go from project to project. In this series, I'm trying like a framework each week. I think if I were to build a project from scratch, I would really debate between React and Vue. I like Vue. I would love to use Svelte, but I'm not sure that it's 100% there. I mean, I think the framework is. It's just that some of the other things like the Svelte Kit, I don't think it's as developed. So I would probably, it depends. I think everybody needs to know React because it's so popular and dominant. And if you're looking for a job, that's really good to have. But I really like Vue.js better. And I wish Svelte was actually more developed. So I'm really excited to see what it's going to happen with this framework in the future. That's a great question. So let's see. All right, so let's get onto Svelte. So this is really a framework that tries to do something different. Let's go to the site, and we'll click over here. It's really and this is what I love about new frameworks. The things I like to explore aren't the things that are almost exactly like something else. That's why Vue, for example, what it did is made React a little bit more simple with like the script install. And the fact that everything made more sense to me. I don't like JSX because it throws me off whenever I get into it, because I usually come from doing regular CSS, and I hate having to do like class name and all those little things that JSX has are a bit annoying. So I like to see things that are not just a little bit like, and I think Vue.js is almost there, but I like things that try to do something new. So I did like a review on Remix that I thought was pretty cool. I did Next.js. I have done a lot of other ones. So this one is actually trying to do something better by helping you write what they call truly reactive code without the virtual DOM. And it does that by trying to help you write less code than you're used to. So if you look at the rise in popularity, and I show you those graphs, I think that it is really climbing, and it has the potential now that Rich Harris has been hired full time to really go up because it's so easy to use. So let's talk about some of these features here. So first is this thing where it says that it wants you to write less code. And I showed you an example in the REPL where when you create a variable, it exposes that variable into the template, and you can bind that value to the template. So this is how you would create, an input field that was able to, I can use this right here. So this input field is a two-way data binding input field, much like Angular 1 was, and kind of like what Vue does, and even React does some of this. But you can see that it's written in a much simpler way. The way that you expose the reactiveness of that particular input field is just by creating a variable, and you can initialize it if you want by making an assignment here, but then it's immediately available to you as a value. You could see that you just sort of create the values of the, you sort of use regular templating language right here, and it takes care of updating everything. So what Svelte is doing that's also super different is just trying to take care of the reactivity without relying on a virtual DOM. So one of the things that slows React down is the fact that it manages essentially your page for you, so that when you do something, it does a little bit of what's called diffing. So it sees if any of the values that you changed in the data by some of your interactions are going to have an effect on what's currently showing on the page. Well, that means that it's got to make that check every time you do anything with the framework. Every time you interact with the framework, it's got to do the diffing, and it's got to manage the virtual DOM for you. And that makes it a little bit inefficient and slow. And so what this framework is trying to resolve is letting you write in a language that is much easier to learn and that feels a lot more natural, but then actually outputting scripts that are going to take care of that interactivity for you without relying on a separate thing that is looking at your page all the time, that manages the DOM. So a couple of things you may notice here is that there is no use effect, which I hate the name of the use effect hook in React, because I don't think it necessarily makes a lot of sense. And it tries to treat you more like a human, I think, Svelte, and takes care of some of the complexities of the language. So it makes it just super easy to pick up, and you'll see lots of things like this where it handles, I think, two-way data binding a lot easier than anything else. Now, the having to do without a virtual DOM sounds weird at first, but with this, you just worry about updating the state normally, and the virtual DOM would normally take care of doing that, like updating things for you. But this is sort of the way that you would write the application if you didn't have to use a virtual DOM. You would just write the application to handle the reactivity, and that's what Svelte is trying to do. So let's take a look at the demo that I have so you can see this in a lot more detail. Before I do that, let's take a look and see if there's any questions. So there's like more people from MM. I don't know where that is. So which framework is useful for the front end? All of them are. I mean, I think that if you want to get hired, I would go, like I said, with React. I think, the reason I call this show the toolbox is because I'm giving you, hopefully every week, a look at something that is interesting. And a lot of times the things that these frameworks are doing will start showing up in other frameworks if the ideas are really good. So React, for example, changed the way that it handled some of the reactivity with hooks, and it made it a lot easier to write. But I think this is still much easier. So let's play a demo of how you install things with Svelte and how it works. So let's go ahead and start with an installation. And this is going to be a little bit different than in most platforms. Instead of having a CLI, you start your project using a template and a utility called Degit. So this would be an npx command, and then we will call this utility Degit, and then we specify the template that we want to use. And so here what you would do is put in the name of the GitHub project. So here I will put Svelte.js and then the template that I want to use. So this template happens to be called template. And then I would give this thing a name that I want to call it locally. So here I would put something like demo Svelte or something. So what this is going to do is actually clone this repository with this new name that I'm giving it right here. So now let's go ahead and cd to this demo Svelte project, and we'll issue an npm install command. All right, so that's going to install everything. Let's go ahead and open this up. We've got a rollup config file. We've got kind of the regular files, you know, a readme, a package.json with some of the commands. So to get things started, you would want to issue an npm run def command. And that actually just runs a rollup command, as you can see right here. Let's go ahead and start that up. So we'll do an npm run dev. And let's go ahead and open that up in a browser. And that's going to look something like this. If we take a look at what we got when we install this, in addition to some of these other files, you get a source folder. This is where most of your app lives. And then we have a scripts folder. This is really to enter any scripts that you want to use with the project. Mainly it's here to let you set up TypeScript if that's what you want to use. But I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I don't really need that for this project. And then we have a public folder. Now here you would put most of the files that you want to just publish with the project. It's going to modify things in this build folder. Here you can put additional files if you want to. And I'm going to add some images to that folder. So just put it in the public folder. And in this images folder, there is a cast.json file. So I'm just going to put that in the same level as the public folder. So we have basically an images folder as well as a cast.json. This is just a JSON file. And here you'll see that there is an index.html. So this is the main HTML file that I get when I use the project. It's calling the bundle. It's calling global CSS. We can, if we want to, import something into this. So what I'm going to do is bring in a copy of one of my favorite quick projects called Pico CSS. And I'm going to go to get started here and just get the link to the CDN. So I'm just going to go with importing the style sheet right into here. When I do that, that should change this hello world. I'm not going to use this global CSS. I could just delete it from here and then take it away from here. So now that we have all that, let's take a look at what's in the source folder, because this is where most of my application lives. This main.js file is your entry point. So this is where we import the application from the main project, Svelte, and then we create an application. This should be pretty familiar if you're used to something like React or Vue. Notice that we are targeting the entire document. So, and then we're actually passing a prop or a variable called name to our project. Where the real magic happens is in this app.svelte. Here we can see that there's actually 3 different things, and this appears on every Svelte module. You have a script section. This is where you put your JavaScript, a HTML section. Svelte is designed to make your life easier. So it doesn't care if you actually don't put a container. So if I just do these 2 tags right here, it doesn't really care. And something like React, you would have to use a div or some sort of like empty tag. Probably a good idea to have a sort of container. And you can also put in here normal HTML. Let's see, let's do actually a style attribute, style, color, and then change it to purple. So it works with just regular HTML. It doesn't need to be JSX. And if I wanted to use a class here, I could do the same thing. Class equals title, and then we can just change this thing here to title. The styles are going to be scoped. Any styles that you put in here will automatically belong only to this component. You can also see here how props and variables work. We can create a variable right here and output the value of that variable here. The value of the variable is being created by these props in the main application. So these would be global props. We can go ahead and delete these. Once I do that, this will say undefined. If we wanted to, we could put it back in here and it would show the value right. We're going to get rid of it. You can also get rid of all the styles that are right here. Let's try importing a couple of different subcomponents to this thing. So we're going to create a component called cast list. I'll just do an import statement, cast list, and we'll import this from a file, and we're just going to call that castlist.svelte. In this same source folder, create a new file, cast list. We'll just put in a div. Right now it'll just say cast list. So we'll go back into the app, we can include it, and it should bring up the text over here. Let's go ahead and add a container class, and maybe we'll put this on a headline level 1 for right now. All right, we're gonna want another component, so that's gonna be a search component. Import cast search. It'll be in the same directory. Let's just do another h1 cast search. Also call it here cast search. All right, so we know how to pass data down to a component. What we need to do is read some data from our file. So to do that, I'll need to import an onMount method from the library. And then I'm going to use that. And I'll use the fetch API to get some information from my file. I'm going to need to put that in a variable. So I'll create a variable here called cast and initialize it to an empty array. And I'll create another variable to hold the loaded cast list as well. Once I have that, I can pass that along to the component. Let's go to the cast list, and we'll need to expose that variable that we passed into this component. And then we'll create some HTML to receive the values. To loop through the values, we'll use the each statement, and I can destructure the values so that they're received into different variables. I'm just gonna need the name as well as the slug. And whenever you do an each statement, you need to close it out with a closing version. Now in here, you just put the items that you want to loop through. My images are all in the images folder, and they have an extension of _tn.svg. And for the alt tag, I can just use the name parameter. I'm also gonna use an h4 tag here to output the name. You can see that all the images as well as the names came in. Let's go ahead and add some styles to make this look a little bit nicer. When we do this image, notice that I don't have to worry about polluting anything else in the application that is an image tag, since this particular image will be scoped only to this component. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's just add a gap right here. With some components, we need to not just be able to pass things to them, but we also need them to bubble up events and also pass along any changes to data. Let's take a look at how we do that with this cast search component. Now this is going to have a script just like the other ones, and it's going to expose a variable called search term. Now we'll be receiving this variable, but we also need to be able to modify it. So I'm going to create a div here, and this div is going to have an input field. Now here, we're going to bind this value called search term. So this is going to allow us to not just modify the value of this input field, but also have the input field modify the value of the search term. Now to do that, we're going to need to use an onKeyUp event, and this is just going to feed an arrow function. This arrow function is going to use a method called dispatch, and it's going to pass along something called update search to the component at the top. Now, in order to use that, we'll need to go ahead and get this, and then also create this variable in here. So that's what's going to allow us to create an element that will send data back into the main component. Let's go ahead and save this. And you can see the box right here. It's not doing very much right now. I can also add a headline. This headline will let me use a conditional statement. I'll say if the search term exists, then what I'll do is I'll add a word called for, and this is how you close out an if statement. Otherwise, I'll put the search term right here. Now we don't really have a search term yet, so that's undefined. We haven't passed it down to this component. But if we type one in here, notice that it does come up over there. So although it's not initialized quite yet, we haven't passed it down from the main component, it's able to tell when the value changes by using this bind attribute. Also, whenever we are typing something into this component, it's sending an event up the chain into the main component. Let's go ahead and capture that. I'll start by creating the search term variable here, and I'll initialize it with an empty string. Now I need to make sure that I pass that here. And you can see that it's no longer undefined because it has an empty value. If I initialize it with a value, you'd see that it would appear not only here, but also in here. Go ahead and clear that out again. Now you can see that I can receive the event that I pass along with the dispatch method. So whenever I encounter this update search method that I'm passing back up, then I can execute an arrow function. And here I'm going to modify the cast list. I'm going to go ahead and run a method called filter that will filter the list of items by the search term. Now I haven't created that yet, so let's go ahead and do that. So this is going to receive a list as well as, I'll call it query here. And we'll just return the list filtered by a variable called item. I'm just going to search for the name, make sure that I convert whatever a user types to lowercase. And I'm going to use the JavaScript match method to match it to the query, also convert it to lowercase. All right, let's go ahead and save that. And notice that now my filtering works. All right, so that's a pretty quick demo. I didn't think it was edited that fast, so I'll slow it down. I usually post just the demo separately on my YouTube channel, so you can check it out later. I promise I'll slow it down a bit. Yeah, it kind of gives you the basics of how Svelte works. I really love that it uses really simple terminology. So for example, if we take a look at, let's see. So let's go ahead and start with an installation. And this is going to be a little bit different. Sorry about that. So let's see, we'll do a side-by-side here and make this window just a little bit smaller so that it fits. So you could see in the app.js like how easy it is to import like the methods. So instead of doing like use effect, you can use this on mount whenever you need it. And that just immediately makes sense as opposed to like use effect, which I don't know why they even came up with that name. And then we import the components just with a regular import statement. And yeah, I think everything is pretty simple. The mount statement just looks like this, and you could do sort of a regular API call. What I like about it is just that I immediately got what it was doing, especially since I came from like React and Svelte. It was very easy to pick up, and the decisions made sense. Whenever possible, it tries to avoid being more complicated than it needs to be. So I know I have a couple of questions on the chat to answer, so let me check those out. Let's see. Okay, so all right, so the retro man, I struggle with dealing with React because I learned Vue first and I cannot reconcile for some reason. Yeah, I know. I get to go through a lot of different frameworks all the time, and it is very jarring. I mean, I really do like React hooks. The way that they work seems very JavaScripty to me, so I really enjoy it. It's not as bad as it used to be. I think Svelte came out before React hooks were available. So it really was a night and day, like a night and day difference, because you can see that it's sort of React hooky-like, I guess. But it does it, I think, better and simpler. And if you go through and learn more of the framework, you'll find that it just has like a lot of things that make sense and tries to like minimize the amount of code that you have to write to get you what you need a lot quicker. So that's a good point. So let's see. Does it like Vue actually? But the main difference is that you do not have to worry so much about emitting events. I don't know. To me, it just makes a lot of sense. So this is a good question from Tiago. How stable is the Svelte ecosystem, and what are the available UI libraries? I would say it's pretty stable. It's been out for several years. I would say like at least 3 years, which is a long time for any framework. I think this is version 2 or 3. I think we're at 2 right now. I would imagine that before the end of the year, you're going to see a major revision of this framework. I hope it doesn't lose its essence. I know when Vue tried to sort of update itself It was trying to do some things like that were like hooks. I think what makes Svelte beautiful is simplicity. So I hope they don't screw that up. But I'm really looking forward to see. If you think about it, the guy who created Svelte was working for the New York Times, and this was this sort of part-time, whenever you have time project. And so, the ability to be able to focus full-time on this, and really the fact that he created this whole other library, this other two libraries actually, Svelte Kit as well as the 3D library, it's pretty impressive for somebody that's working part-time. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully a major revision that just brings everything up to date. I can't see what else they could do. I think Svelte Kit probably needs a lot of help. I don't know that there's that, there's definitely not as much stuff as you would find for React or even Vue. This is like, if you look at the popularity, it's like React, then Vue, maybe Angular next. It depends on how you check the popularity. So Svelte is right up there with Angular, either before or after. It depends on how you measure the popularity or the usage. I think in usage, I think definitely Angular would be more widely used. But this is such a fantastic framework to work with. Like I said, the user satisfaction was like at 90% or something like that. So it's ridiculous. So that's a good question. Appreciate that. Let's see. Yeah, something like a Vue SPA setup. I'm not sure what that means. Let's see. I'd like to know more about the dependencies, that this is something that's kind of painful. So we can take a look at the package.json. It uses rollup as the sort of library. As I mentioned, Rich Harris, the developer of this framework, also created rollup. So you can see that it's mainly just using rollup. So whatever the dependencies are for rollup is what you would get here. I would almost imagine that if they were to do it again, they would use something like Vite. That would actually just create another layer, which I'm not sure is something that you are looking for. So that actually it is Svelte 3. That's great. Actually, the code for Svelte hasn't really changed all that much. So I can imagine there's probably going to be like a version 4 coming up soon. I don't know, like if you do package.log.json, it's going to be sort of long, but it's just mainly roll-up dependencies. And you can probably take a look at this. So if you look for the links, I have a copy of this demo on my site. So this is the demo repo, and you can go play around with it. If you have, code spaces, or even if you just want to play, I think you would need code spaces in order to do this. So if you have access to that, then you can just jump into VS Code by hitting the period on any GitHub repo. So yeah, you can totally play with this. You can go to the REPL on their site. It's really easy to install. But if you want to start up with the demo that I just showed you, then you could just go to this repo and just look for the links that are at the top of the chat or on rabo.org as well. So super cool. Let's see if there's anything else. That's a good question. Can we declare a function and reference it by name? What about performance? So this is where this framework was designed to be more performant than React. I don't have any numbers to give you, but the reason it's designed the way it is because React is inefficient, because it is constantly running a process that is managing the virtual DOM. It's constantly like diffing changes between the interaction of your application and what the application is actually doing. So this is doing kind of the same thing, but without relying on a diffing virtual DOM that runs all the time. So I would say this is probably more performant. You are writing in those .svelte files, but they actually will get output to JavaScript. And that's why, the joke was that, can it save JavaScript? That's exactly what it's doing. It's basically a compiler for JavaScript. In the future, who knows? Maybe it'll compile to something else like Rust or something even faster. So I'm curious to see what they do. If you look at some of the moves that Next has made, part of Next or a lot of Next is being written now in Rust for performance. So I see that, coming into a lot of different places. And since, the guy now works for Vercel, I imagine they're probably going to maybe have support for Svelte and Next. I don't know what's going to happen, but it should be super interesting. But I do believe that the reason for this framework is the performance issues with React. So Yeah, that's a great question. So Svelte Kit uses Vite. Okay, I didn't know that it already started using. Yeah, like everything is switching to Vite now. So that's a great. I do have a previous episode that I did on Vite. If you've never tried it, it's pretty awesome and super easy to pick up as well. So yeah, so they did hire him full time to work on Vite. There's actually a really good YouTube video from Vercel talking to Rich and talking about what he's thinking about where Svelte is going and the things that you might see in the future. So I'm super excited. Do I recommend Svelte with TypeScript? That was another question. Well, I mean, if you like TypeScript, go for it. I'm not, the reason I'm not although I have used TypeScript and I think it's fantastic for what it does, I feel like if I am demoing something that I need to just use normal JavaScript, because I don't know if the people that are watching my stuff are already into TypeScript. So I tend to just go for vanilla JavaScript. But yeah, the default installation with this template came with a configuration for TypeScript as well. So it's completely, I think if you look at also that State of JS survey, people are moving to TypeScript strongly. Like I think I want to say 40 to 50% of projects are in TypeScript. If you were going to try to get a job in the industry, I would probably make sure that I learned React in TypeScript or React with TypeScript or just anything else and have TypeScript as sort of a language that I understood well enough to work on. It's not that, honestly, it's not that difficult to pick up. So super. So Svelte and Svelte native. Whoa, I'm going to keep my eyes. Yeah, I think you should. This is like, again, the reason for the show is to introduce you to the concepts, I think, that are interesting. I think that if you look at, for example, some of the reactivity, once one of the frameworks adopts it, all the other frameworks start picking at it and making improvements to be like it. If you look at some of the frameworks like Astro and some of the other frameworks that introduce like all these interesting new features, all those are eventually copied. That's one thing that I really loved about last week's demo of Next.js, that I was really impressed at how much it was adopting that was present in a lot of other frameworks. So I think that if you look at Astro, it tries to do something different. I did do a demo on it. If you look at Remix, it is trying to do something different, like trying to mainly be like a backend framework. The one that I loved the best was actually Next, is because it just gave you fine-grained control over, do you want to pre-process all these pages, or do you want to run this just on the client, or pre-process this on the server? And when you combine that with Vercel, it's going to actually also give you a lot of pre-caching of a lot of your components. So it's really, really powerful. In terms of meta frameworks, I think Next is definitely the one to watch. The unfortunate thing is that it only works with React. So whereas like Astro will work with anything, and some of the other frameworks will work with everything as well. Next is definitely tied to React, but who knows? Maybe that'll change in the future. So let's see. Let's build. Yeah, definitely keep an eye on it. I'll probably, if a new version of this comes out, I will be doing another episode. I plan to sort of revisit other frameworks when I learn about them, just to make sure that I'm keeping up with everything. It's kind of tough to keep up, so just let me do it, right? Like I spent some time with, and I've done courses on like Angular, React, Vue, and a lot of other ones, and this whole series of things from the toolbox has been me trying to figure out what the interesting parts are of some of these like cutting edge frameworks that everyone hears about and wants to maybe try. So I'm trying to give you like, here's what's really interesting. And I think the thing about Svelte is how easy it is to pick up. Everything is made to be simpler. So that's why you just use regular HTML. You don't have to use JSX. You can use class. You can use the style tag. You don't have to do like a style object. I mean, a lot of those things are cool in React, but it just assumes that you want your life to be a lot simpler. And that's really what I like about it. So let's see. I like plain JavaScript. But yeah, so a lot of companies don't really like plain JavaScript. And, that I think that's why I call this thing the toolbox. Like, you need to have a lot of things in your toolbox. And so pick up a TypeScript project. It really isn't as, challenging as having to learn like a lot of different frameworks. So, but a lot of companies that hire will want you to have that as well. Can we use server size rendering in one project like Next.js with Svelte? So yeah, I mean, you can target different parts of the application. I believe, I haven't really tried this, but you saw how by default it's targeting the body, so pretty much the entire page. But you can make it just target part of the application. I've never really combined the two, so I imagine, I'm not sure that, I don't know that Svelte Kit is as far ahead as something like Next.js. So I don't know that you can use, like, you can pre-render things, or you can say, oh, this is going to be surfed in the back end. Again, now that they're all one big family, Vercel and Next.js and Rich Harris and Svelte, I figure some of those things. Remember, Vercel is a hosting company, so it's in their best interest to have things move to the back end because that benefits them, and also that's what they're good at. So I expect those things to happen. Like I said, I love things like this that are simpler, and I think the concept of why do you actually, just challenging the fact that people like the virtual DOM because it makes their life easier, but do you actually need that? You really don't. This is more performant if it doesn't need to do all that sort of interaction with the page, if it's just written in good JavaScript. And imagine if, this thing could compile to like Rust or something else that would make it even more performant. I think that's what Vercel saw, not what it was already doing, but the potential of what it could become. And that's why they hire Rich full time. So super awesome. Let's see, Tiago. So I'm not sure what that is. What kind of projects do you recommend? I would say, man, I would love to use it for like simpler projects. I think that definitely Svelte Kit is not ready, but it's just keep it in the back of your mind, and let's see what happens with the next version. Let's see what Rich does. Let's see what Vercel does. Just keep it in the back of your mind, because I do think that it is almost like a superior language and a superior way to write things just because of its simplicity. But I don't think it's 100% ready for like a big production project. So I would maybe use utilities. Also, it is really good at animation. So and I think Vue does this as well. Vue has all these like animation hooks. As Svelte also does that as well. So I would say simpler projects, and this is definitely like a wait and see sort of platform. But keep it, keep coming back to the toolbox, and if anything changes, I'll definitely let you know. So awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very much, everyone, for coming. I think that's pretty much the end of the episode. I have meetings coming up. So yeah, make sure that you follow me on LinkedIn, especially if you want to go through that other course and you want to learn how to, install other modules, or, how to use Sass with the project. And I'll do another framework probably next week, maybe. I don't know if I'll be slowing down a little bit because I have a lot of other projects that I have to go to. But just follow me on LinkedIn and you'll be able to know, and follow my YouTube channel as well. If you need, to watch any previous episodes. A lot of the episodes are pretty current. So I don't think I have anything that has, gone out of style. I think Astra released version 1.0, but I'm pretty sure the course that I did worked out. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you again hopefully next week, and if not, a week after that.